What up, Badger fans? The over-unders are out. FanDuel has Wisconsin at 8.5 wins this year for the football team. We're going to go through the schedule, Justin and I, and we're going to see where we end up if we agree or disagree with that over-under on today's Locked On Badgers. Let's go.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to another great episode of Locked On Badgers. I'm your host, Ryan Herrings, as always. Thank you so much for tuning in, making this one of your first listens every single day. We really do appreciate you. We got Justin, we got the man coming on the show. And over-unders are released, Justin, on FanDuel. There are other places as well, but we use FanDuel here. That's our jam. Wisconsin's is 8.5. We're going to go through the whole schedule. We're going to make our picks, our very early picks.
So before we do this, because I think it's clear, we're going to have people that are going to look at this and be like, well, if we play well, that's a win. I want you and I to establish, all right, if we're going to look at these from the standpoint of if we give our average level, and that's what I wanted to say before we get rolling here, what do we consider to be the average level? Like, what would be a ho-hum game for what we expect for this team this season?
Well, I don't think I'm already kind of there because I've talked before about I don't expect us to be hitting.
And that's fair. Maybe we won't be. Maybe it will take a couple of years for the offense to truly start humming here. But what do you consider to be like average for this team?
I don't know. I think that's part of the problem. I think that's part of the problem, right? We don't really know. We don't really know what the high water mark will look like for this team and the low water mark and what's in between there, because we've never seen this group of coaches, players in this environment. I think there's a lot of questions that people are talking over.
So if we're taking a look at the offense here now, to put in perspective here, most of the Chris teams from an offensive standpoint were roughly between 25 and 20 or 29 points is pretty much roughly where they sat on average for points per game. Do we consider that underselling what we expect this year?
Yeah, I think we'll score more than that for sure.
Do you think we're going to be over 33 a game?
I don't know. I mean, defense.
That's starting to get to the point where that's kind of the barometer for me. If you get above 33, you're kind of looking at it and being like, all right, this is a good offense. Like that's where you start talking. This is a top 40, top 30 type offense at that point. If you start getting above that level, I think 32 for me would be a nice first season. Would be probably the best offensive season we've had since 2019.
Yeah, I think we're going to give up more points too. So,
I think we will. I would say we're probably going to be in the right around 20 a game, which would be a step back for us.
Yeah,
maybe
so
19.
It may not. And listen, there could be some games against Buffalo, for example, where they're overmatched and we put up a 60 burger, and then we end up scoring 27 against Iowa. You know, I can definitely see that scenario. Or on the road against Wazoo, which we'll get to. You know that. We'll start with Buffalo.
Let's go.
That's a scary one to me. All right, so Buffalo. I mean, obviously, we're both going to win there.
Yeah.
The Luke Fickell era gets started.
Yeah, I think Buffalo is a healthy win. I'm hopeful that we see the offense show some signs. I don't expect it to be clicking, but by any means. But I would love to see us put up 40 in that game. And I think from a talent advantage standpoint, we should be able to do that. What we do defensively will be interesting to see in that game. But yeah, I think we'll win healthy in that game.
I think that's going to be such a fun game just because it's so nice to like lead off. I don't want to call anybody soft, but with a soft opponent, let's just be honest. Yeah. You're not leading off a new era with a bunch of
it's not the Lance Leipold Buffalo team that we're going to be facing.
No. And in a season with so many changes, I think it's absolutely critical that we get a bit of a preseason game. So I'm really excited for that. But it's just going to be so fascinating to see all the new pieces, man, the new parts, see how the defense looks, like you said. I think they're going to murder them. I think it's a statement game, opening day, Camp Randall. I think they put the hurt on Buffalo. Then let's go to the second game of the week, going across the country, road game. Washington State beat us last year in Camp Randall. The quarterback's back, right? Cam Ward did not declare for the draft. My early thought is this is a loss. I think Wisconsin drops this game. I think it's going up against an established quarterback, a pretty solid team, a road game, different time zone, a bunch of changes offensively and defensively for the Badgers. I think people are overlooking this Washington State game. I think it's a loss for me.
I think it's a win, and I'll say why. Number one, I think that this team's going to come in salty to that game because they lost to them last year. There's some players left from that roster that are definitely not going to be happy with the way that game played out. But the other part of it is, I think Washington State lost a fair amount of defensive talent, and I think that was the underlying story of that game. They played really well defensively against us, and now Graham Mertz didn't help us.
I was just going to say.
But I also believe in Tanner Mordecai far more than I have ever believed in, Graham Mertz going out there. Could the game be close? Yeah, it could definitely be. I'm not going to come out there and say like last year where I expected us to cover, and I think we had a 17-point spread. But I do expect the offense to be competent in this game. And I don't expect us to bang our head against the wall and just keep running into a 9-man box, which is effectively what we did against Washington State. I just think Mordecai's the difference here. You have a quarterback that if they're going to stack the box, I think he's good enough to be sharp and pick them apart. And we may not win by a lot, but I think he'll make enough plays to get us the win in that game.
We may not have the quarterback advantage in that game, though, with Cam Ward. Cam Ward
he really didn't impress me last year.
3,000 plus yards, 23 touchdowns, 9 picks, and he can move. Almost a 3-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. And he's more familiar in that system. I don't know. We may not have the quarterback.
Isn't it it's a new offensive system though? They lost their offensive coordinator.
I still on the road against an established quarterback, a team that beat us last year with a bunch of changes. That to me feels like the type of game we dropped.
That's fair. We just disagree.
No worries there. And I hope you're right. Like, again, we always talk about this stuff. I hope we don't lose anything. Like, I hope we beat every team 75-0. Georgia Southern, thoughts?
Yeah, that's going to be a bloodletting in that one.
Yeah. That is
bludgeoning.
A bludgeoning for sure. And then we're going to finish up here with this first segment, kind of wrap up the first quarter of the season. Then we go to, and this is a game Rajiv has talked about as being kind of a sneaky trap game. We go on the road to Purdue, new coach, new quarterback, Hudson Card now at Purdue, which that's a legitimate, at least from a pedigree standpoint, that is a legitimate quarterback. Road game, what are your thoughts going to Purdue week 4?
So I think that this is a team that may have some growing pains because I think I can respect what Rajiv thinks, but I don't think their offense is going to be remotely what it was. I think when Braum leaves, it's a big piece on the offensive side that's walking out the door, and you're starting a new quarterback. I don't know what their offense is going to be. So to expect them to be dynamic on offense, it seems like a stretch to me. Now, Card, I think Card is a good quarterback. Like he at least has a lot of potential, but I can't look at that offense and say that I expect them to be as dynamic as what they've had in the past. Now, defensively, I expect them to take a step forward, but I do expect growing pains there because they have not been a good defensive team in 15 years. Like they haven't. Drew Brees and some of the other guys that were running around with the Boilermakers. This is the last time they actually had like what you'd call a salty stout defense on that team, and even then, it was more driven by the offense. So it will take some time, but I think they get substantially better this year on defense than what we've seen in the past. I just think there's also going to be some regression on the offensive side. So I think this is a game I expect us to win because I think they're actually going to be more in flux than I think we will be, where our defense is still more kind of established. And I don't think there's going to be as much question as to what that is going to be on that side of the ball.
Yeah, I have this as a win as well. I'm not as quick to just say their offense is going to fall off a cliff. I think I don't know. I'm curious to see what happens there. They have a real quarterback potentially, and that is basically the Band-Aid over any type of offensive issue. But I do think it's a win. I have us losing Washington State. I do not think we're going to start the Luke Fickell era with losses to Washington State and Purdue. I think I just can't. And Wisconsin has recruited significantly better. I think they have the quarterback edge. Hudson Card hasn't really proven anything. I think they have better weapons. I'm going to give us a win here, which brings us into our bye week. And by the way, if you hear me typing, I'm keeping notes on the side just so I can remember what our records are. I am at 3-1 to start our Big Ten journey with Luke Fickell. Justin, the ever optimistic Justin, says 4-0 going into the bye week. We're going to take a quick break, and we're going to talk about the timing of the bye week. Is this good for us? And then get into the meat of the schedule and see where we finish up with the Wisconsin Badgers over under the season. But first, today's show brought to you by our good friends over at Built Bar, the #1 tasting protein bar on the planet, my go-to nutritional supplement, something that again, tastes good. It's healthy, not a lot of calories. I love the churro, but there's also a cookies and cream that I like. There's a chocolate brownie that I like. There's a birthday cake puff that is ridiculous. My kids ate my entire box. So that happened. Well, we're going to just continue to get more. Built Bar continues to pump out great flavors. If you want the best tasting protein bar on the planet, without question, it is Built Bar. You'll thank me later. Go to Walmart, get your 4-bar box. Go to Sam's Club, get your 13-bar variety box. Built Bar, the best tasting protein bar on the planet. You will thank me later. All right, let's bring Justin back on the show. Do want to say thank you to everybody who listens, all the everydayers. If you're here yesterday, you listened to Brian Smith breaking down Mabry Metzauer in his NFL-ready arm. If you're here today, we got Justin. Tomorrow, we're going to respond to some of your questions. So thank you so much for continuing to listen. Justin, let's jump into here. Bye week 5, after Purdue, right before Rutgers. Feels like not the greatest timing to me.
No. I'm not worried about that extra prep week for Rutgers heading into this year. So
not that worried that Purdue's going to beat you up along the lines and you need 2 weeks to recover.
No.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so let's jump after the bye week. I mentioned home game against Rutgers. I'll kick this one off. I think that's a win. Rutgers, they're just not going to be able to compete coming off the bye week. Wisconsin. This is actually here's where the bye week kind of helps you. Still. Again, new systems, new schemes on both sides of the ball. It allows the coaches probably to take a step back, take a look at what's working, and continue to fine tune it, get more reps, clean up some of the almost certain growing pains through the first 4 weeks of the season. I think they're probably going to come out and lay it to Rutgers. I have us winning that one and moving to 4-1.
5-0 over here.
Nothing else to add. I love it. A clean sweep of the Rutgers prediction, and now we get into a tricky one. Home game. But it is against Iowa. Iowa, according to FanDuel, over-unders at 7.5. So right behind us in the Big Ten West, we are at 8.5. I say we. Wisconsin's 8.5. Iowa's 7.5. Minnesota's also 7.5. There's a lot of kind of bunched up in the Big Ten West. Where do you have this game? I'll let you start on the Iowa one. Home game, Iowa. You have us at 5-0 going into this one, which would have us ranked. We'd be in the 15s, 16s, somewhere in that
probably
range.
Somewhere in there. This is a game that scares me. For whatever reason, we struggle with Iowa. And offensively, even with a more dynamic offense, I'm still a little worried because they seem to always have like a top 15-ish type defense, and they seem to muck things up so good against us, even when we do have a decent passing game. So it's a game that I don't love. And when was the last time we had a running back just go off against them? Probably Melvin Gordon. And it was a hard-earned game for him to get to the
I think Taylor had a good game against them in one of his, but I would have to go back and look. No, we don't gash them for 300, though, to your point.
No. Even getting to 150 is tough against them. So we're going to have to pass the ball in this game. And this is a game where I could see Mordecai struggling a little bit. And that's where my fear is in this one. I'm going to go ahead and say that I think that this one may be a loss. I think that the step up after Rutgers is going to be substantial. So it wouldn't shock me either way. I'll call it a loss. I'll be optimistic that we hopefully win it, but I'm going to call it a loss for the purposes of this.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think this is our second loss of the season. I do think part of me just doesn't believe Iowa can continue to be so helpless offensively. Right?
Yeah, that's the other part of it.
They just cannot be. Of course, as Wisconsin fans, how many years did we say we can't be that bad again?
Is it possible that that dad just leaves the son? I mean, you're walking back from Madison.
So Iowa should have an upgrade at quarterback, not substantially, but bringing in McNamara from Michigan, Eric All from Michigan. Yeah. Obviously, they know what to do with tight ends. I think the defense will reload. They always do, man.
Well, McNamara is exactly what you want for their offense. Like he fits that to a T.
It's a step up they just need competent, right? Yeah. And he can be competent for them. I think they're going to be solid again on the lines. I have this as our second loss of the year. You have it as our first. Hopefully, again, we're wrong, but we both have Iowa winning that game. This is another kind of tricky one. Let's go to Illinois now. Obviously, Illinois came into Camp Randall and laid the wood last year. Bielema lost the defensive coordinator, lost Mike Brown, the running back, but did add – his name is escaping me. The transfer quarterback from Ole Miss, I believe it is. So did upgrade the talent at quarterback. Where are you at on the Illinois game on the road?
I think that this is where a game where we may drop the hammer. Coming off a loss to Iowa, everyone's going to be angry about losing to them last year, especially in an embarrassing fashion that we had last year. And I just think that they're going to regress defensively. Like Bielema is not a defensive mastermind. We have seen this in the past with him that he's very inconsistent. If he has good talent running the defense, meaning a good defensive coordinator, they tend to be good. And if he doesn't, which we have no idea what they have, then they tend to kind of flounder. So I could see a step back. I believe isn't it Aaron Henry running the defense now?
It is actually,
which he's getting his feet wet, but I think there'll be some growing pains there as a defensive coordinator, first-time coordinator. So I could see us winning this game, and I could see it being by 10 plus.
Yeah, former Badger great Aaron Henry. I agree with you on this one, Justin. I think you come off that. First of all, I think Illinois last year, it feels like a bit of a pop-up, pop-down season. Like the Big Ten West was
it's going to take them some time to grow.
Yeah, I don't think people are giving Bielema some roses on this Illinois turnaround a little prematurely, in my opinion. That was a bad Big Ten West.
The roster, and the roster, like you and I both know, it helps having the transfer portal the way it is now, but it takes time to revamp a roster. Like you could be carried by starters for a year and then have things take a step back when those guys graduate. That's why I expect Minnesota to kind of take a dump. They're losing so many guys who played 5 straight years for them. And now you're going to have these underlying guys that you haven't played that are going to have to step in and be expected to play substantial roles.
Yeah, it feels like they're going to be rowing upstream there in Dinkytown. I also have us beating Illinois. I don't even, for whatever reason, I'm not even particularly concerned with that game. I think Wisconsin bounces back big, takes it to Illinois. Then we get into the Ohio State game. That's a loss. It's a loss. They're better than us. Their roster's deeper. They have more continuity. We haven't beat them in 11 years. We not beating Ohio State, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that really the area where we find out whether or not we have a chance to pull the upset there is going to be the quarterback. If he's a hit, then I think it is what it is. At this point, we just don't have the roster to stack up quite with them yet. Now, in a couple of years, could we? Sure. We might be ready in a couple of years, but it does help that they'll have a first-time starter, so you have somebody less experienced, but I'm not quite sure that we have the talent level yet to step up there. And maybe we're wrong. I'll happily enjoy the win if we somehow get it, but yeah, this is a loss for me too.
Yeah, and let me just add a couple caveats to this. I would say they don't even need to really hit at quarterback. They just can't bust at quarterback. The talent everywhere else on that roster is still – they've been recruiting 4 and 5 stars everywhere for years. So as long as the quarterback's not a disaster, and this is also week 7 at this point, the quarterback's going to have some time to get into the group. I will say, though, if we can get a rowdy environment, let's say we don't drop the Iowa game and we're coming in of maybe just one loss, like a top 12 team. Maybe we get a night game. Oh, my goodness, that environment with the first-time quarterback at Ohio State, that could be a difference maker that could tip the scales. But they're too good everywhere else. They have 4 or 5 stars everywhere.
It would not shock me that both teams come in undefeated for this game. Like that is not something that would be crazy that we see at this point in the season. But I do, unless Wisconsin plays out of their minds, I don't see them winning this game, which they're capable of. I think that there are some difference makers this year. Like Mordecai is a guy who you can look at and be like, hey, he's done it before. He could go out and have a 4 touchdown, 1 pick game and carry us in this game. We have some wide receivers who I think are dudes that can have big games against Ohio State, but having them all put together in one game is something that they have to prove, and we'll see. But
you also have to be healthy. There's so many things that you need to upset an Ohio State team there. All right, let's move on. We got after Ohio State. You are now with 2 losses. I have 3. We're going to go on and play the Hoosiers on the road. It can one more final take on Ohio State because it's going to lead into my Indiana point. I do think people may think I'm coming off kind of negative in this show. I do think we're going to look much better against Ohio State than we have in years. Like we're going to be competitive. Same going back to that Jack Cohn kind of Big Ten title game. I think we're going to be competitive. We're going to be on the field. And because of that, I don't think we're going to suffer kind of this post-traumatic letdown from Ohio State. So I think we go on the road and take it to the Hoosiers and we get back on the winning side.
I don't think we look so ridiculous offensively where it's like spinning our wheels constantly. I think that we're going to put together some bright spots in that game where we look at it and be like, there's hope for the future here, where we have a passing game that can cause some problems for even teams like Ohio State.
And I'm assuming you're taking a win against
Yes.
Indiana on the road. I don't want to speak for you, but
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to be a close game.
I agree. We're going to take a quick break there, come up, finish up the schedule, give our final takes on it, and maybe pick out one other Big Ten team where we think people are either a little too high or a little too low on. Just to recap really quickly, Justin, you are at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 2, I believe at this point, and I am at 6 and 3. All right, we're going to take a very quick break, if my math is correct. We're going to take a very quick break, come back with the last part of the schedule, Big Ten over-under Wisconsin Badgers football. Really do want to say thank you to everyone who's tuning in. Really do appreciate y'all so much. Let's keep this going. Let's finish off this schedule breakdown, this look ahead. Very early, obviously. Very, very early. But it's a lot of fun to break it down and talk about it. Justin, I'll start this one because for 2 years now, I think everyone's kind of caught up. For 2 years, I've said Pat Fitzgerald is a ridiculously overrated coach. This nonsense about him being – listen, Northwestern is not like McNeese State. I mean, you can win there. Other people have won Big Ten titles there, by the way. He's had 2 consecutive, ridiculously terrible years. His only recent success was in the weird COVID year. Wisconsin coming off the Indiana game gets Northwestern at home. I think they wax them. I think they beat them. I don't think it's competitive.
Yeah, I look at him, and it's a lot like Paul Chryst had Jim Leonard and the other defensive coordinators. Mike Hankwitz was amazing as a defensive coordinator for Northwestern. He knew the ins and outs of the Wisconsin offense and how to give us fits, and which is why Wisconsin played so poorly against them, and some of the other teams actually looked pretty good. So I think that losing him and him retiring was a huge loss for them. And I have not seen somebody that looks like they're capable of replacing what he left with. Like that knowledge and knowing how to – I think he had a really good insight into how Paul Chryst thought during a game, which is a big part of why we looked so incompetent against them offensively. But yeah, until they get a defensive coordinator that shows that they have a pulse against us, I'm not worried about that game at all.
Yeah, by the way, that's where somebody inserts the joke. How difficult was it to prepare for that Wisconsin offense necessarily, right? But no, they did great against us, especially in Evanston. This one's in Madison. I think we both have the win there. Wrapping up, we got 2 really interesting games to end the season. We got Nebraska at home. I'll let you start with that one.
Yeah, we're gonna win it. I'm gonna be blunt. I think Matt Rule is actually a good hire for them. I do think that they will get better. I think that we have more depth. We're further along in development of everything than what they are, and they have massive roster turnover there, and they have a bunch of pieces that they're trying to piece together and find chemistry with, and there's not really anything for them to lean back on. Now, it's possible things could come together early. I just don't see it quite yet. And I think that we have a quarterback edge there fairly substantially in that game. I'm not afraid of Jeff Sims.
Yeah, Sims is super interesting to me. I think Mordecai's the better thrower, certainly. Sims gives you a little bit more of the dual threat stuff. He had some really interesting metrics where he hit, I think it was 21 miles an hour down on a workout. Like he can do some unique stuff where at the college level that plays up. But to your point, I agree. I think we win this one. It's at home. I've talked a lot about the coaching turnover we have. To your point, exactly. They have a ton of coaching turnover and a ton of roster turnover. I also like the Matt Rule hire. I think it's a good hire for them to bring some stability. I think they're a couple years away, not just from beating Wisconsin, but from competing in this conference if things go right. I'm not even sure if they can get to there. So that's another win for me. I agree. I'm a little higher on Jeff Sims, I think, than you are, but Mordecai's the better thrower for sure. Yeah. All right, let's wrap up the season here. We go to Minnesota. Is it possible we lose again to those teams? Listen, I said last year there's no way we'll lose to Minnesota again. There's no way. Not at home. I think we beat them this year, though. I think they have a ton that they have to figure out, losing their stud running back, Ibrahim, Tanner Morgan. They lost some defensive pieces as well. And I just don't think they're as good this year. And quite frankly, I think Luke Fickell is going to put a point of emphasis on this game. It is a huge deal to him. You've already seen the chippiness go back and forth in press conferences a little bit. I think we not only go across the board and beat them, I think it's relatively easy, like a 10, 13-point game.
I think Luke Fickell views PJ Fleck as the little gnat that is flying around. Like, seriously? Why am I dealing with this guy? This guy's not in my class. And I kind of look at this game as this. Yes, I do see it as a point of emphasis. I don't know why people think that they're like 7.5 seems like a stretch to me for where they're at for this year, because they've had a mass exodus of guys who are considered to be starters for their defense. They've had a bunch of guys who gave them a ton of production that they lost, who just don't have eligibility anymore. And if you look at it, their quarterback had one good game last year, and it was against us. And I do not see that happening again. It's a different defense he's going to see this year. So it's not going to be Jim Leonard's defense that he's prepping for. And I would be shocked if Luke Fickell and them don't adjust to how they threw the RPO against us. So I do not see that being them gashing us on that again this year. I think our defense will be more athletic, which I think will cause more problems for them. And I don't see them being able to play the same defense that they played against us last year, where they basically just ran blitz the whole game. Like they came downhill, they sent the linebackers constantly against us, and Graham Mertz just offered nothing in a passing game to be able to combat that. So I think that we will be looking at this completely different this year. I think this is a game that we win comfortably. And I think that he wants to make this a game where we blow them off the field and basically like, yeah, we're done with you. We're putting you back in your place.
Yeah, I mostly agree with that. I do wonder what the Gophers quarterback, after a full year, a full offseason prepping to be the starter and a full season worth of reps, what he looks like with a little more experience. Certainly he has some athletic tools. I was not impressed last year. I thought our defense had just a horrid showing.
Mm-hmm.
It was really weird. I thought our offense was horrible that game. That game was just ridiculously terrible all around.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think we take care of business against the Gophers. That puts me at 9-3. Justin, you are 10-2, which puts us both on the over of the 8.5 with FanDuel. Let us know in the comments where you're at. If you're going to side with the ever optimistic Justin, going at 10-2, or the little more realistic. Like, I like to live in realism, not like Justin and Rajiv off in Optimism Island over there.
Sure, that's me. I'm known for my amount of like unrivaled optimism when it comes to Wisconsin sports.
A river and waterfall of optimism overflowing. I will say this, Justin, because we've done over-unders for 3 years now, right? This season, last year on the Locked On podcast, and the year before on the BuckyCast when we were doing that one, we've gone over every year.
We have.
The last 2 years we've been wrong. So,
right, and this year it's going to be because we're undefeated.
Listen, I'm all about it. I'm all about it. I do see your scenario where we could go into Ohio State undefeated. I don't think it's likely, but I also don't think that's a non-zero.
It would take a lot of things going right. And I think like you're not wrong in that it could be 9-3. We could be 8-4 this year. Like there could be growing pains with this team, but I think the talent is there for the records that we're talking about. Now, whether they actually achieve that talent is another question.
Well, and I've talked about it before too. 9-3 to me is not a disappointing season.
No,
like
it'd be a good step. We would just want to see progress.
Right. It depends on how you look in games, but 9-3 with the first time coach, to me, that's not a disappointment. Now, would 10-2 be better? Obviously. Would 11-1 be better? Even better.
Mm-hmm.
What is the one team, Justin? You went 10-2. If we're 9-3, let's say we lose the 2 games you talked about that you picked, Ohio State and Iowa. What's the third game maybe you'd be most worried about, or the third game you would point to and say, yeah, I don't love that one?
I think it has to be Washington State at that point. I think that's an early game where we may not have things might not be kind of humming along yet on offense, and we could just be inconsistent offensively. Defense might still be a little work in progress with guys kind of trying to figure out and second guessing some things where we could end up losing a game like that.
Let me ask you, we're going to end on this one. We had some more stuff we were going to get into, but we're kind of running short on time here. But I do want to ask you, what scenario would you prefer? Beat Ohio State but lose to Minnesota, or lose to Ohio State but beat Minnesota?
Lose to Ohio State, beat Minnesota.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. Okay.
I want. Listen, I'm okay with us having to take a year to get to Ohio State and be able to handle or hang with them. I am not okay with losing to Minnesota again. I think that program is beneath us from a talent perspective, and I do not want to continue to lose games to a team that's I think is inferior to us.
Yep, that program is beneath us in every perspective, not just talent, from national prestige, from marketability, from head coaching acumen. I mean, from everywhere you want to point to, from the quality of people that live within the borders of the state that the university represents, from everything that program is beneath us. We cannot lose to that Yeah, so I agree with you 100%. Anyway, he is Justin. I'm Ryan. Thank you all so much. Really do appreciate everybody tuning in. Let us know in the comments where you're at on the over-under. The number is 8.5. And give us if you're over-under and the final schedule and who you think we're going to lose to, if anybody. On Wisconsin, and we'll talk later.